This is Jean Meyn. Welcome to In the Know Women Show, where women share the stories of their lives and inspire us all. And with this episode, we celebrate Women's History Month. Today, our guest is Justice Mary Yu. Justice Yu has been an advocate for social justice and a leader in our state's legal community. She is the first Asian, Latina, and lesbian to serve on the Washington State Supreme Court. Welcome, Justice Yu.
Thank you, Jean. It's nice to be here.
Well, good. We are delighted to have you. And so when you were growing up on the south side of Chicago, did you ever see yourself sitting on the Washington State Supreme Court?
You know, frankly, Jean, I would say I was not thinking about being on the state Supreme Court. I was not thinking about being a judge, a lawyer, or frankly, even anyone professional. It just wasn't within, my purview of who I could be or what was there as an option. It just wasn't there.
Well, tell me about your parents and your childhood then.
Sure. Well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I'm hesitant to designate classes as a way to distinguish people, and yet I would say I grew up in a lower working class community. My father worked in a factory all of his life, and he and my mom met in Chicago and settled in a little community called Bridgeport. And most of us thought about growing up and maybe working at the grocery store, and if we did well and could pick up some typing skills, we would end up maybe as a secretary in an office downtown. So it was a really simple life and a good life in the sense of family was very important. But economically, we didn't have a lot of resources, and I never even had a bedroom until I went to college. So it was, again, a pretty simple life.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any siblings?
I have one brother. His name is Richard, and he now has moved out to the Northwest, and so he actually lives just, 5 or 6 blocks from me, and I'm just happy as can be that he's here.
Oh, delightful. And what was your neighborhood like?
In Chicago, when I think back, there were small little bungalows, some apartment buildings. When I've gone back to look at the neighborhood, it seems so small in the sense that there might have been 10 feet between each home. It was just a small little busy place, and yet I have very fond memories of growing up there because we were kids who played outside and ran into one another's homes, and there really was a sense of community.
And we have a picture of your first grade class. Well, you were in first grade. It's a first grade and second grade. And it was St. John's, I can't pronounce the next name.
Nepomucene.
So that's clearly was a private school?
It was. When we were growing up, first of all, my mother was Catholic. And being Mexican, that was really important, not only culturally, but spiritually. To be a Catholic was very important to her. My father, who came from China, actually grew up on a cargo ship. So when he arrived in the United States, he literally just left the ship in New York and made his way to Chicago, and didn't grow up really in a family or in a community. And so when he and my mother fell in love in Chicago, one of the commitments he had to make was that he would raise our children Catholic. That's what they said to him. That's what my mother said to him, is if we have children, they're going to be Catholic and you have to support this. And my father, without hesitation, said, of course. And so I'm told that as soon as they were married, he put $5 away every time he could to set aside money for tuition so that someday, if they had children, those children were going to go to a Catholic school. And that's exactly what happened. My brother and I walked to school, which was just 2 blocks away, and it was St. John Nepomucene, and that's where we were educated.
What does Nepomucene mean?
It's
a random question, but
it was the name of the saint. Okay. And so it was St. John Nepomucene, and Nepomucene was just really the name of John, who became the saint. Okay. And that's why the school was named after him.
All right, very simple. And then you also shared a photo of you in 3rd grade, which is equally cute, with long hair.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of...
So was there a time when your vision shifted from you know, the top goal of being a secretary?
You know, my vision didn't shift at all until high school, in the sense that there was a teacher. Her name was Joan Finnegan, and I'll always remember her because she was the turning point in my life. And it was Joan Finnegan who came to me when I was a junior and said, "Mary, did you ever think about going to college?" And I just said, "Gee, no. Kids like me don't go to college. We don't have any money. I don't even know what college is. I've never been to a college." And she said, "Let me take you to where I went to college." And she did. She took me out to Dominican University, which is now the new name of this educational institution. It was called Rosary in those days. And then she came to my family and pleaded with my parents to let me go to college. And my parents, as much as they were very supportive of me, they really believed that girls did not need to go to college, right? You grow up, you have a family, why would you go to college? And so she had to talk them into it, and she did. And she helped me fill out the application to her alma mater, which was Rosary College. And that was the turning point in my life. It just opened up many possibilities that I never even dreamed of.
And then, so you had women professors at Rosary College, Dominican University. And so what were your professors like?
Well, you know, the Dominican sisters were pretty progressive in those days, very much focused on higher education and women, and they knew that that was really the path for opportunities for young women. By the time I went there, Rosary had just become a co-ed college, and so things were changing. They had more lay faculty. The religious sisters there were committed to also being a place that would be a bridge institution for many young people from the city of Chicago. And so there was a lot of outreach, and it became more and more diverse. By the time I was a senior, there were more students of color there than before, and it had become, again, a bridge institution.
And what does that mean, a bridge institution?
Well, I think it's a term that refers to a place that would give disadvantaged individuals or people who might not have had a traditional education an opportunity to go to college. And so it really is sort of a bridge from that maybe tougher inner city life to something new.
And did they have a particular philosophy that they promoted that ultimately led you to focus on fighting for social justice?
You know, I think maybe it was awakened in me as a young adult in college, but, you know, the vision of social justice really comes from my parents and growing up Catholic. It's, you know, my mother was very open about sharing how difficult it was to grow up as a farm worker. They made their way from Mexico through the country, through Texas. They worked the fields and made their way to Chicago. And my father worked very hard in a factory. So my mother was really persuaded that we had to know that story. And for her, it was why we needed to do well in school and why we needed to think about doing something different, because she wanted a life for us where, and I remember her saying this, "I don't want your hands to look like ours. I don't want you to have calloused hands. I don't want you to work in a factory." And for her, the best vision she had was, "I want you to be a secretary where you'll be in an office and your hands will be clean and you'll be paid well." And so that was the vision she painted. And for my father, I think the sense of social justice was, "I just want you to be able to speak up for yourself." He told us stories that even as a man, people referred to him as a boy. And so I think that's where it all began, is the sense of there's been an injustice here, and how is it that we do something different? How is it that we make it better for others? And then growing up as a Catholic, that vision was nurtured by my religious faith that really at that time believed in the social mission, if you will, of the church, that it had an obligation to promote the human dignity of every single person. And what promoting human dignity meant is really fostering civil rights, equal rights, the opportunity to participate in the economy. So I think that's where it all started. And then, of course, nurtured at Dominican University.
And then you worked at the Archdiocese Office of Peace and Justice. Now, I'm going to say that I grew up going to a Presbyterian church, and I don't remember our church having an Office of Peace and Justice. So, and that's just what you were talking about Catholicism.
And Jean, it's just timing and destiny. I just have to say that it really is just timing and destiny that nobody controlled. And the reason why I say that is when I graduated from college, I first thought I would want to teach, and then I became intimidated, and so I made my way down to the Archbishop's office, which was a large administrative building with all of the different branches of offices and agencies of the Catholic Church, and said, "Do you have a job? I'll take any job." And at the time they said, well, we're opening up an Office of Peace and Justice, and the priest who's going to open up this office needs a secretary. And I said, that's me, that's my job. And I interviewed with Father Kane, who is now a bishop, and we both sat there trying to imagine, well, what does an Office of Peace and Justice do? And the reason why we were asking that question is because in the mid-70s, the Catholic Church had gone through its own awakening of asking itself, what is the social mission of the church? It's not just to do charitable work, but it's to do the work of justice. It's to ask the systemic questions. Why is it that people are poor? Why is it that Chicago remains so segregated? It's to ask the larger systemic questions. So it was just the opportunity, it was being there, and it, again, opened up my world in a different way, is to really become engaged then in asking those questions at an institutional level that arose. It just came up in my life. I became the secretary, I became a staff person, and then eventually was made the director of that office. But it was timing and opportunity.
Yeah, a 10-year stint.
10-year stint.
So how did you switch to then going to law school?
Without trying to sound like a cynic, after 10 years of trying to persuade people to do the right thing because of a moral vision or because of one's faith, I got a little exhausted. And I'd have to say, I thought I need some new tools to accomplish the same goal. And our work brought us in touch with many lawyers. And so I thought, lawyers can make people do things. They don't have to persuade you. They can make you do things in the sense that the law controls our behavior. And so I was tired of spending time on the south side of Chicago trying to convince, frankly, the white community that it was okay to sell their home to a black family. I was tired of the pushback and racism. And so it finally dawned on me that, well, enforcing civil rights laws will make people do the right thing, regardless of what's in their heart. That a way for social justice to be promoted would be to use the law to accomplish that. And so I became, frankly, very attracted to the law, and then sought to apply to different law schools and ended up at the University of Notre Dame.
Continuing the Catholic school tradition.
Continuing the Catholic school tradition. I wanted to be in an institution that would look at the law differently, that might say there is a context for studying the law. And that's not necessarily true, right? There isn't the Catholic law. There might be a lens by which we look at the law, but otherwise it was a really sound education, but it was attractive to me to try to do that in the context of faith.
And then you end up in Washington State at the King County Prosecutor's Office.
Well, while I was at the University of Notre Dame, I was involved in trial practice, and that is, as a student, you kind of find your niche. And I was a barrister and really thought, I think I might like to do this. The Notre Dame network is also very strong. And so, again, opportunity and destiny just happened to come all together. And that is that my partner at the time was relocating to Seattle, and so I had to make a choice. Was I going to be joining her, or was I going to stay in the Midwest? And I opted to join her and come out to Seattle.
Yay.
Yay.
For us.
Never a regret in my life. And the Notre Dame network kicked in, and that is there was a prosecutor who was working in King County, who was from Notre Dame, who reached out and said, look, we'll find an opportunity for you here. And I joined the King County Prosecutor's Office, fell in love with the prosecutor at the time, Norm Meyn, who was a sincere, genuine, good individual trying to do justice. And he gave me the opportunity to work full time.
Now, some people would not really see a transition from social justice to law enforcement, which is really what a prosecutor's office is. So how did those jive for you?
You know, well, one is being very practical. You need a job, right? Just like going and getting that job to be a secretary, I needed a job, and I needed to be here, and that seemed like a safe environment. And when I interviewed for a full-time position, and the elected prosecutor sat there and said, Mary, I'm committed to securing justice, right? I will not ask our prosecutors to secure convictions for the sake of securing convictions. He said, our job as prosecutors is to secure justice. And sometimes that means losing. And I thought, I want to work for this guy. These are the values that I have embraced my whole life. It's not about winning and losing. And when he began to paint that picture that a job as a prosecutor is to secure justice first, I thought, yeah, this is the place that maybe I could advance justice, that maybe I could be a player.
So is there a particular oddball or funny case that comes to mind from those days?
You know, I wish I could say there was a funny case, but you know, I have to say that coming into court is such a traumatic experience for every individual. The only fun that I had was later in life as a judge, you know, doing adoptions, doing happy things. But overall, coming into court or even holding people accountable for their actions is not fun. It's serious, and you know that you're disrupting somebody's life. So I can't say that I look back and find a funny case. I find the events of my life funny because I only really was a criminal prosecutor for a very short time, and then I moved to the other side of the office, which was the civil division, which then was really the defense agency for county offices. And so one of the clients that I was assigned happened to be the King County Superior Court. And so I was spending a lot of time with judges. I was spending a lot of time with the court as an entity. And it was there that, again, that shift occurred in my life, where then a judge came to me and said, I'm retiring, Mary. Did you ever think about being a judge? And it was that voice that comes back and says, no, not me. No, I never thought about being a judge. No, that was not a dream of mine to become a judge.
Just opportunity, timing, as you mentioned earlier.
Opportunity and timing is always what's been the precipitation, or the precipitating moment, if you will, is something happens and I respond. But it wasn't my idea.
Is that the state Supreme Court story too, also in 2004, bringing us up to 2014?
It's exactly the same thing. You know, I was pretty happy at the King County Superior Court. I have been doing the job for 14 years, pretty settled, pretty comfortable, had done every type of case that could be done, and so it was a comfortable space, and I could have imagined myself doing that forever. And then my good friend, Justice Steve Gonzalez, who was at the Supreme Court, who had just been appointed 2 years beforehand, says, hey, there's an opening and you need to apply. And I just said, Steve, I'm really happy at the King County Superior Court, and I see you commuting between Seattle and Olympia, and that's really hard. And he said, oh, the commute's nothing. He said, but you know what, we need you. We need another trial judge up here. We need somebody who understands what happens at the trial court. And he said, you should apply. And he said, really more importantly, we need also a woman of color here, because it's never happened. And I gave it a long, hard thinking, reflecting moment in my life. I really spent some time thinking about it. And I thought, you know, I'm not entitled to this position, but I'll be darned if Governor Inslee is not going to have a diverse pool of applicants to choose from. And then I decided to go ahead, fill out an
Well, congratulations. A blast from the past. And then you were elected. So
I was appointed, elected, and that was already, I guess it's hard to believe, I was elected in 2016.
Mm-hmm. And so when you went to the court, Mary Fairhurst was on the court. The woman who had such an impact on the state of Washington and Washingtonians, and a mentor to so many, including me. So, she talked when she retired, and we're speaking of her because she left us, at least left the earth in January. She spoke of the dissent that she wrote that she was proudest of. And just for folks who are not lawyers, a dissent in a decision is the minority opinion and not the one that rules. And so the proudest dissent she wrote, she said, was in the Anderson versus King County in 2006, which was the same-sex marriage couples, same-sex couples who had applied for marriage licenses and had been denied. What did that dissent, you were a Superior Court judge at the time, but what did that dissent tell you about Mary Fairhurst?
You know, I'll also get as emotional talking about Mary Fairhurst because of her presence in the legal community and on the court. But that decision spoke volumes to all of, the LGBTQ community. And it's because Mary was a Catholic. Mary was a practicing Catholic. And it was courageous for her to say what she said. And frankly, at the end of the day, what she said is, this opinion is nothing other than bigotry. And she called it the way that we saw it. And she finally just said, I see the LGBTQ community. I see gay families. I see lesbian couples with children. And I see that it's much more than what the majority would ever say. And Mary called it the way we saw it, that it was simply not a decision that was, in our view, grounded in the law, but otherwise was just promoting the status quo of a misunderstanding of who our community is and would be in the future. And Mary spoke so clearly, so eloquently, at the risk of being scolded by the church. She spoke very loudly and clearly.
Yes, and I found it interesting also that Justice Barbara Madsen, who wrote a plurality opinion, was also Catholic. And they both felt like they had done the right thing.
How ironic.
I know. It is, just as a little, So this, then, 2012, Washington State, by a vote of the people, I was reminded, passed a law that same-sex marriage was legal and was okay in the state of Washington. And so what did you start doing at midnight when that became effective?
Well, it's so interesting because, I remember that vote that night that passed the referendum. And, it was obviously with great joy because it was an important moment in the history of the state of Washington. And yet there was also a sense of profound sadness that our rights were being declared by popular vote rather than by a court and under the rule of law. Something not quite right about that. And yet at the same time, given our own history in the state of Washington, it made sense that it would be by popular vote, that the people at the end of the day would have the final say. And so I remember thinking how important this was, and my bailiff at the time was a young man, young Asian man who was actually mixed race, said to me, Judge, this law is going to take effect on December 9th, and you know what? People should not wait one more minute to get married. Let's do it at midnight. Let's do it as soon as the law takes effect. And I said to him, Takao, do you think that the court's going to let me do that? And he said, let's ask. Let's just try and let's just do this. He was so right, and it's because his mother and father could not be married as a mixed race couple in D.C. And so there was a personal story behind this when he came to me. And I said, let's do it. And the court supported me, the executive branch supported this effort to open up the courthouse in the middle of the night and to do this. And at midnight, we married the first same-sex couple in the state of Washington. And it didn't end there, of course, because we ended up doing this till 7 in the morning. And it was a random selection. We just said, you know, we're willing to do this. Anybody who calls us, we'll do this marriage. And it was a young couple from Mount Vernon, 2 teachers who just happened to be the first to call us to say, we want to do this. And again, it was a marathon session. It was a remarkable, remarkable evening.
Mm-hmm. It was a remarkable time. There actually were weddings in the Capitol Dome in Olympia that took place one day after that filled the Capitol Dome, the balcony, everything. I was there. So that was exciting. So since you do conduct marriages, you actually have gained some celebrity. You have been on Jimmy
Kimmel.
Thank you. I knew it wasn't Fallon. Thank you for the help. On Jimmy Kimmel. And so tell me what that was like, that experience.
Well, first, my assistant got a call and just said, Judge, somebody wants you to be on Jimmy Kimmel. And I said, it can't really be a real call. And she said, no, I think it's real. She said, and they would like you to come on the show because they do this segment on the show about the names of people. And I said, okay, well, if they call back, then we'll consider it. And about a month later, somebody called back and they said they wanted to chat with me, and the staff chatted with me and said it was really a sincere effort by Jimmy Kimmel because they do this national search to find people whose names kind of coincide with what they do. And so they were amused by the fact that my name was Mary You, and that I actually marry individuals. And so they literally sent equipment to the Temple of Justice. It was a little computer that somehow connects you right to Jimmy Kimmel. And they worked with us on the lighting. It was pretty impressive. And I have to admit, it was a lot of fun. And it's just important for us to remember that levity is a good thing. And I enjoyed it very much. And he was very kind, and their staff were very kind to us.
Well, it is fun, and you're important. Levity is important.
It was fun. And it was fun meeting the other individuals.
Well, good. So this is Women's History Month, and the state Supreme Court now has a majority of women by 7-2. So what impact do you think that has on Washingtonians?
You know, that's a great question, Jean, because I often ask myself, does it make any difference? And I do think it makes a difference. I think the optics says a lot to all of the people in the state of Washington that it doesn't really matter in terms of gender. And it matters at many levels, of course, our gender, but it doesn't matter in terms of who sits in those seats. What they're looking for really are people committed to the law. They're committed to trying to do good, trying to seek justice. And I think really the best candidates have emerged because all of us have gone through an election. And I think it's really a stamp of approval from the state of Washington that says, yeah, we like these people who are there. And they're all different, and they have different life stories. And so what it does is say, yeah, that opportunity is available to everybody. Every little girl in the state of Washington can look up and say, you know, I can be there. It's not a barrier, the fact that I'm a girl. It's not an issue. And it's because this battle has been fought by many others before me, that anybody who wants to be a Supreme Court justice can be. And I think the same is true for people of color. I think now, when you look up at the Supreme Court and you see 4 people of color, I would hope that the same thing, a little boy or a little girl can say, gosh, my race is not going to be a barrier. I can do this. I can be there. No matter who and no matter what, I can be on the state Supreme Court. And I think that's important. I don't think the fact that we're supermajority changes the dynamics of our decision making. Now, I know that we have had some discussion. Justice Johnson is really good at poking fun at himself to say, well, now we talk more about the cases. And I don't really know if that's true or not, but I think he appreciates the fact that everybody is interested in the cases and that everybody's interested in processing together and really listening to the lived experience of others and reflecting on what the law ought to be.
And actually, the first woman on the state Supreme Court was Carolyn Dimmock in 1981.
Yeah.
And then coming back to Mary Fairhurst when she went on the court in 2002, that was the first majority of women in 2002.
There was something really special about Mary when she was chief. I have to say that she was exceptionally skilled in facilitating discussion, because that's one of the roles that the chief plays. It's not just the figurehead, but in our discussion of cases, it's the chief who leads the discussion, and it's a very formal process. You have to be recognized before you speak. Nobody's shouting over one another, and Mary was superb in facilitating that discussion. She really wanted to be sure that everybody felt heard. And if you misspoke, you know, she really had rules and the expectation that civility at the end of the day would govern at the table. And I love that the most about her, is there was a genuine, sincere kindness in what she did and how she did it.
You know, in Shirley Chisholm, you know, historical figure, in 1969 was the first black woman congressperson, and later ran for president in 1972, the first black woman to seek nomination of a party. And at the time, in 1972, I was 22 and had recently graduated from college, but I'll never forget that she said that she had received more discrimination as a woman than as a black person. And I wonder, with your intersection of Mexican and Chinese heritage and being a lesbian, is there any one of those characteristics that has created more obstacles than another?
You know, I would say race has, and I wouldn't describe it as an obstacle, but I think I have probably suffered more negative reactions to me. And here's one example that comes to mind, and it was fairly recent, before COVID, but recent in the sense I was at a social function. It was a fundraiser, and I was there with everyone else, except the majority of the people that were there were white. And I happened to just have one of my Mandarin shirts on that I wear and love to wear. And I was a guest, and what happens more than once, but this time it hurt so much, is somebody came up to me and gave me their dirty dishware and said, here. It wasn't even a nice way to say, could I give this to you? Because maybe they were going to do something else, but it was clear that I was there because I was working it and perhaps even serving them in some way. And not that that's a bad job, but the assumption made because of how I looked. Maybe it's how I was dressed. But the assumption hurt. And that has happened more than once. It's just the feeling of not being welcomed, the feeling of being other. And I'm not convinced it was gender. I am convinced it was my race and ethnicity, the assumptions.
I'm sorry that happened. How recently was that, did you say?
Oh, I bet it had to be 2.5 years ago at most.
Wow. Wow. So, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the Washington Leadership Institute with the State Bar Association. So you have a couple minutes. So if you would explain what that is, and then that is how you're helping to address this particular issue even.
Well, the Leadership Institute is a program that is a leadership development program that targets traditionally underrepresented lawyers. So we really try to reach out to lawyers in rural communities. We reach out to lawyers who are from a diverse background in order to provide them with some leadership training. It's an intense 8 months. We get together once a month for 2 days. And it's a chance to really lay out the rules of success and to assist them with pairing them with mentors. And so it's a way to fill the pipeline. It's a way to help people grow in their level of confidence in terms of who they are. And it's an effort to retain these lawyers in our profession. And so, yeah, we're now at 192 graduates. And I co-chair that with Mr. James Williams, who was a manager at Perkins Coie. And the two of us have been doing this since 2006 in terms of co-chairing it.
Mm-hmm. And I watched a video presentation and saw that one of the graduates, actually from 2009, is Nick Brown, who is the current U.S. Attorney for the Western District.
Yes, he was a star, and of course he claims his class was the best, and we have every class claim the same. But Nick Brown is one of the many success stories that we have. We now have some of our graduates who are in the legislature and others who work for the court, and many who are now judges.
So with all of the work that you've done, including with the Washington Leadership Institute, as we wind down our conversation here, what advice would you give to anyone who is struggling or has things thrown in their way for working on their passion?
Gosh, the advice might always be is don't run away from a challenge. We learn as much from our failures as we learn from success. Wade into the deepest part of the water. Accept every challenge as an opportunity. And be ready to say yes. I mean, when I look at my life, somebody opened a door and it was up to me to either walk through it or to stay out. And not knowing what was on the other side, I walked through it and it was always a gift. Not that it was easy, but it was always a gift. And it's what really has changed my life and gave me the opportunity to serve in this capacity. So I would say, don't be afraid.
In celebration of Women's History Month, we want to let you know about a website at the Secretary of State. It's called Ahead of the Curve. They highlight women in history, and it does include Mary Fairhurst, who we talked about, and also Carolyn Dimmock. So take a look at that website and women who have starred in Washington State history. Thank you for joining us again on In the Know Women's Show. Till next time.